Okay, the NFL draft is closing in, and I feel pretty comfortable at this point to give you my final top 12 pre-draft rookie running back rankings. Keep in mind, this is pre-draft, so it obviously will change after the NFL draft. That will be very crucial information that we will need to adjust to. I'm going to give you 3 tiers in my top 12, and I'll explain each tier as we go through. Okay, right before we get into number 12, do me a massive favor, guys. Drop a like to show some support. Subscribe if you like Dynasty content, and I want you to comment down below as I go and tell me why I'm so wrong, why one of the players that you love should be higher or someone should be lower. Let's start with tier 3. Let's be honest, straight off the bat here. This running back class is really, really deep, okay? And this tier 3 represents a lot of running backs. Every single one of my running backs in tier 3 could end up as high as running back 4 or as low as running back 12 in my rankings. That is how deep this tier 3 is. Draft capital and landing spots will end up being the ultimate determinator for how I rank these players. But check this out. If you want Dynasty rookie rankings that will be updated after each day of the NFL draft, go to flockfantasy.com/land. Use our code LAND, LAND, for 30% off and be ready to dominate your rookie draft season, okay? At number 12, starting off with a very good running back. Again, this is such a deep class, Kendre Miller. There are 4 things that I really like about Kendre Miller. First off, his size, 6 foot, 220 pounds, the ideal size and frame to be a running back that gets 15 to 20 carries in any given game. He's a young running back. He's only 20 years old by the time he'll be drafted. He'll be 21 years old as a rookie, but he is a very young running back in this class. Good strength, big, strong runner, not afraid to hit you in the mouth type of running back. He had 816 yards after the contact. That is 12th of 168 running backs in college football this year who had a minimum of 100 attempts. Each time I talk about a running back, assume it's a minimum of 100 attempts. He also had 70 forced missed tackles, which was good for 11th of 168 running backs in college football. Great contact balance. That definitely shows up on film. My concerns personally are the athleticism. I just don't think he's a special athlete. I know someone in my comments one time was like, are you kidding me? Kendre's an elite running back. I understand there's a huge Kendre supporter base out there, and I was kind of leading that train in the mid of last season as someone for him to look at, but I just couldn't get on board with how high some people had him. I don't think he's a special athlete. I think he's a decent athlete, but what's difficult is he had this injury throughout the entire pre-draft process. So he had no opportunity to improve his draft capital or really to put his name on the map. And if anything, that's going to hurt his capital, I think. So we don't have any testing numbers or anything. Doesn't have great long run speed and is a question mark in the passing game. In obvious pass scenarios, TCU opted for another running back on their team and left Kendre on the sideline. If you look at his current NFL draft projection, he's projected to go in the 4th round of the NFL draft as the 11th running back off the board. Keep in mind that could change. He could go higher, he could go later, but this information is being compiled from all the major mock draft people, right? Analysts out there in the world. We're compiling all that into an ADP. If you look at my pro comps for him, very similar to Chris Carson. That's kind of the ceiling I see for a Kendre Miller. And maybe Kendre Miller ends up getting drafted later like Chris Carson does, but he's still a talented enough player to show up at camp and take someone's job. Floor, looking at a Kerryon Johnson, a Ronald Jones. Again, I like Kendre Miller, but I just can't have him higher than this right now. But again, like I said at the very beginning of the video, he can move up all the way to running back 4 if the draft capital is right. It is such a deep class. All right, staying in this tier 3, at number 11, we have Tank Bigsby, a huge hype name coming out of high school. And I personally don't think he lived up to the hype. His film is very difficult to understand, okay? On one play, he'll look like a top 3 running back in the class. On a lot of other plays, he just looks like a guy, just another running back. I don't get the inconsistencies. And I understand that Auburn had, some pretty clear weaknesses within their offense. Let's talk about the good things. big, strong frame, 6 foot, 215 pounds or so, can break tackles for sure, forced a lot of missed tackles, 60 of those forced missed tackles, which ended up being good for 21st of 168 running backs. He also, this is the most impressive thing about him in my opinion, yards after contact per attempt, he was 12th in the nation at 4.16. So he's like a very good bulldozer, short yardage type running back. His role in the NFL feels very clear to me. However, I don't think he has very good vision or patience, specifically on outside runs. He just doesn't really recognize running lanes well, in my opinion. And the burst really isn't consistently there for him to exploit the lanes that are available to him. I don't think there's much in the lateral movement area. Just not a player that really jumps off of the film for me. Had a pretty decent testing. His relative athletic score was 8.33 out of 10. Actually very comparable testing to Sony Michel, currently projected to go in the 3rd round of the NFL draft as the 6th running back off the board. So he definitely is a name, of course, that could rise in rankings. I'm just staying true to my process at this very time, but of course, if he goes higher, he can move up. I kind of look at him a little bit like a Marshawn Lynch, Brian Robinson. That is the ceiling for this player. The floor is much lower, a Joshua Kelly type player. So like the range of outcomes there is like, hey, he could be a real impact player, but he could also just be a role player. And that's what's difficult about Tank Bigsby. I don't see anything that kind of makes him stand out from the rest of the class personally. All right, staying again in this tier 3, let's talk about my number 10 running back, Chase Brown. The good with Chase Brown, he had a massive workload in college, which you like to see that he can handle that. At least NFL teams, I'm sure, would have liked to see that. Handled a huge amount of Illinois' offense last year in 2022. In fact, he accounted for 60.2% of their rushing attempts and 75.5% of their rushing yards as a team. Pretty good pass catcher, definitely has some speed and some burst and some juice out of the backfield, and tested really, really well. His relative athletic score was a 9.81 out of 10. Very comparable testing to Jerick McKinnon. And, you know, that might not sound good, but Jerick McKinnon was a pretty good athlete coming out. But I do have some pretty big concerns about Chase Brown, and I'm really curious what the NFL thinks of this player. But if you look at some of his analytics, for example, yards after contact, right? He was 7th best in the nation, which is a pretty, like, that's an awesome number to see. But I think the context behind that is the amount of volume he saw, okay? Only one other running back had more rushing attempts than Chase Brown in college football this year. He had a ridiculous amount. He had the second most rushing attempts out of 600 plus running backs in college football. So some of those numbers, it's better to look at a per attempt metric, right? So if you look at yards after contact, 7th in the nation, but how about per attempt? Yards after contact per attempt, very low number, 108th of 168 running backs, just not a good number. And to me, that's what I saw in film. I saw someone who really struggled to break tackles and to get into the open field or to make the first man miss. I didn't think he was all that difficult to tackle on film. So I have some concerns myself. I don't think the vision, the patience is all that great. He doesn't seem like a very elusive player. Again, I think he gets tackled pretty easily compared to some of the other running backs in this class. But again, I think the things that stand out with him, incredible athlete, that is huge for a running back, proved it with his testing scores, good pass catcher, and has had a massive workload in college. But lastly, you know, it's like some of these other guys in tier 3, there's just not a single part of his game that I think really separates him or puts him into a category of his own. At the moment, he's projected to go in the 4th round as the 10th running back off the board. My pro comps for him would be Devin Singletary, Jerick McKinnon, and the floor would look like a Boston Scott. But I do like this player. I imagine if the capital isn't there, he could definitely fall behind Kendre Miller. All right, at number 9 in the same tier here, let's talk about Roscoe Jones, or Rashawn Johnson. We call him Roscoe on the channel. What's good about this player is quite obvious. Size, right? 6 foot, 220 pounds almost. This is a huge mammoth of a man. And there's a clear defined role for Rashawn Johnson in the NFL. You don't have to guess or wonder if he can handle opportunities in the NFL. Like, he absolutely has the body to do so. Clear defined role, like we said, big body, short yardage scenarios, goal line back, but also something that goes unnoticed about Rashawn Johnson is his pass catching ability. He served as kind of the reliever back for Bijan Robinson for all of his career, and he did that pretty well. And he had some pretty good receiving games there at Texas. And I feel like you almost look at a comp here, kind of like Ramondre Stevenson is a true ceiling. Unlikely to happen, but that is the true ceiling for a player like Rashawn Johnson. Tested pretty well, 8.67 relative athletic score out of 10. Compared really well in their system to Le'Veon Bell, which I thought was interesting. I don't think he's anywhere near the athlete Le'Veon Bell was, but interesting name to bring up compared to Tyler Algier, Brian Robinson. But the concerns are obvious. Huge lack of production, right? 4 years at Texas. I know Bijan was there, but even before Bijan was gone, you couldn't separate yourself from the rest of the running backs there. In fact, he only averaged 7.8 attempts per game. So it's tough to really project him to have this huge role in the NFL. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's easy to project his role. It's just how involved will he be? At the moment, he's projected to go in the 3rd round of the NFL draft as the 7th running back off the board. My ceiling comp for him is Ramondre Stevenson, and my floor is Hassan Haskins. All right, at number 8, again, staying in the same tier, let's talk about Syracuse's Sean Tucker. Is there another single running back that has hurt their stock more this offseason than Sean Tucker? I would go out on a limb and say no. And I'm not sure what the NFL thinks about him. I don't think anyone knows what the NFL thinks about him. Came to the combine, didn't test because of an injury. Pro day, didn't test because of an injury. Released this footage online from an iPhone. Looks like it was edited in iMovie. I don't know that any scouts are really going to take that seriously when they're watching it, but let's talk about the good in his game, because there's a lot of good watching the film, okay? The vision is definitely there. He is a special, creative running back behind the line of scrimmage. If something's not there, he can create for himself, which is quite rare to find. And I think of the running backs we have talked about so far, he does that the best. Great acceleration, great speed. I have no doubts that if he was healthy, he would have tested pretty well in that area. But again, when you don't test, it hurts. It typically hurts you, right? But he's also a very versatile player and a very good pass catcher. So in PPR formats, it really intrigues me. He had 297 snaps where he ran a receiving route. That was 6th of 168 running backs, 46.8% of his total snaps. Very incredible number. I love the glow up from him in the passing game this year. In fact, he improved as a pass catcher every year at Syracuse, from 8 receptions in 2021 to 18 in 21 to 37 receptions last year. He continually improved in that area every single year. The concerns, overall strength, to me on film, he just doesn't seem like a reliable goal line running back, and I'm not sure he's the bruiser for a team. I don't know that he ever. Let me say this: I don't think he has like true 3 down upside. It is there, but it's very rare that will be unlocked. And like I said, I don't know what's happened to his NFL draft stock. Right, it could have plummeted. It really could have with the offseason that he had. Currently projected to go in the 4th round as a 13th running back. If I told you that 4 months ago, you would have thought I was joking. Everyone thought he would go maybe 5th running back off the board. Still could happen, but there's a lot of unknowns. We're talking about tippy top ceiling, and I don't want to get too crazy here because this is the unlikely scenario. But Austin Eckler, I think, is a very realistic comp for his ceiling. But for his floor, a more, I guess, realistic. Yeah, really, this is more realistic, like an Antonio Gibson type of player, a Ronald Jones type of player. But I just think he's better than Ronald Jones. So somewhere in the middle there, very, very exciting player to watch on film. But again, maybe the most question marks outside of Kendre Miller entering the NFL draft. Okay, at number 7, this player has the most to lose, I would say, here in this tier 3. And that is Devin Achane, okay? I have tried my best to stick up for him, and I still think he could be a special player at the next level, but I'm just being honest. If the draft capital is there, there's not much that we can argue against. However, I think the draft capital will be there. Talk about the good parts of his game. Truly elite speed. And that word gets thrown out a lot, but in this scenario, it actually matches. He does have elite speed. I think he has almost in the same category, elite burst, can get to that top speed quickly, great change of direction, stop, start on a dime type of athlete, type of player, great lateral quickness and footwork, quick feet when getting through the line of scrimmage, and very good pass catcher, which is a drastically underrated part of his game. He ran 299 snaps, where he ran a receiving route that is 5th best in the nation amongst running backs last year, and that accounted for 48% of his total snaps. Currently projected to go in the early 3rd round as the 4th running back off the board. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up in the 2nd round, honestly, because of the type of speed that he has. Just typically those players are pushed up boards, but the concerns are clear, right? Let's be honest, the size. Not many examples of players at his size being successful fantasy running backs. So I'm here to acknowledge that the role might be limited. My combat to that is I think his role would involve high quality touches, okay? So maybe he only gets 10 touches a game, but those could be those very high quality touches. Think of what Jarrett McKinnon offered to the Chiefs in the red zone, right? In obvious passing situations. Like, those are the type of opportunities we could see for a player like De'Von Achane. Strength is clearly a concern as well. But if you look at De'Von Achane, I mean, a couple things that people might be surprised by. Did you know that De'Von Achane had more rushing attempts last year than Zach Charbonnet, than Tank Bigsby, than Jahmyr Gibbs, than Zach Evans? Did you know that he had a better yards after contact per attempt than Jahmyr Gibbs, Quinshon Judkins, Blake Corum, Eric Gray, Raheem Sanders, Chase Brown, Sean Tucker, Israel Banikonda? I think sometimes people underrate him and just write off his film because of how small he is. All I would do is would encourage you to just sit down, have an unbiased opinion, and watch his film. I will say the testing numbers are not so hot. 5.73 out of 10 relative athletic score, not the number that you really want to see there. Pro comps right now, the ceiling is Darren Sproles, Tariq Cohen. The floor is a DeAnthony Thomas. So there is a pretty low floor for a player like De'Von Achane. But I think there's a possibility that he's an outlier. If he falls into the perfect spot, let's say the Dolphins in the 2nd round, I think all of us are going to be all in. But let's see what happens to him in the NFL draft. He has the most to lose, I would say, in this tier. Okay, at number 6, and again, we're still in tier 3 here, Tyjae Spears. The good is obvious. I mean, just put on the game versus USC and you'll see how this player could be explosive at the next level, right? First thing that stands out about him is the lateral explosiveness. He can seemingly, move laterally while at a top speed without losing any speed. It's actually quite impressive. Very good contact balance, kind of balances off of defenders. Really good long run speed, can absolutely hit home runs in the NFL. Currently projected to go in the 3rd round as the 5th running back off the board. So that's something that we like to see, what he's currently projected to go. But the concerns are there, right? The size, he's only 5'10", 201 pounds. Is he talented enough to break that mold like some of the other players who are undersized but very talented? You tell me. He's also an older player who has had a serious knee injury. He tore his ACL in 2021. Will NFL teams take that into account? And there's some serious question marks about his receiving abilities. It's tough because I believe he can, based off what I've seen, be a change of pace 3rd down running back, for sure, a complementary piece. But there's just not really any receiving production to prove that. Relative athletic testing score was pretty good, 7.52, compared a lot to Justice Hill, just purely athletically. My pro comps for him, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Some people might not like that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Michael Carter, a little Justice Hill, Zonovan Knight. I like the player, but as an undersized player, I think there needs to be a little bit more for me to be all in. But if the NFL is all in, it'd be hard to say no to a player like this who has just so much backing from the entire community. At number 5, you can call me stubborn, you can call me whatever you want. This is still where I have Zach Evans, and he is truly an enigma to me. I've said this before, but I loved his TCU film, absolutely loved it, was obsessed with him actually. But his Ole Miss film raises some serious question marks. So let's talk about the good and the bad, really. The good, I think he has incredible lateral quickness, like right up there with Tajay Spears. When I talk about a player who can stay at their speed and move laterally and not really lose a step, he has that in his game. Really good burst. I think there's a lot of great burst on film. And I don't, this is something that people have said because he's protected himself. They say he's afraid of contact. I disagree. I think if you put on film and you watch multiple games, you'll see this kid initiates contact, like sometimes to his own demise. Like sometimes he doesn't need to initiate contact, but he's just such a bulldog putting his nose down that to me, it's something that he's not afraid of whatsoever. He's also a very high IQ goal line running back, and you'll only see that if you watch enough film, but he knows how to operate on the goal line and to convert short yardage scenarios into first downs or into touchdowns. And this whole narrative that he wasn't the workhorse at TCU, to me, is unfounded. I think it's something that people say, but there's not really much backing behind, okay? Keep in mind, guys, that TCU wasn't even ranked last year, okay? They weren't even ranked. No one anticipated this being a team that would make it even top 10 in the rankings, let alone the national championship. Okay, that kind of came out of nowhere. So in Zach Evans' mind, he transferred to Ole Miss because that team was highly ranked and there were more expectations for Ole Miss than TCU. But regardless of what you think about it from this perspective. The only real sample size you and I can take away from Zach Evans and Kendre Miller is when they were teammates, okay? That was in 2021, and there were 6 games that Zach Evans and Kendre Miller were healthy, and they were both healthy, and they were both teammates, right? In those 6 games, Zach Evans had 32 more attempts. He had almost double the yardage, had a better yards per attempt, and had 5 touchdowns. So again, I think the narrative is unfounded. Others are, welcome to believe whatever they want to. You can disagree with me in the chat. But there are some serious concerns, and it starts with the vision, which a lot of people will know. You'll probably have heard this before, but I don't think that he is unable to read open lanes. I just don't think it's consistently happening. And to me, it shows a player who's just not comfortable in a system. Again, at TCU, I saw much better vision, but at Ole Miss, that area just declined, which is slightly concerning, right? However, in the open field, past the first level, the line of scrimmage, I do think he has very good open field awareness and is able to read the best option for him to extend a play. And then also pass catching. We just don't know if he's a good pass catcher. I think he can. Like, he has all the skill sets to be a good pass catcher, but again, just not much production with being a pass catcher at Ole Miss. Currently projected to go in the 4th round as the 9th running back off the board. And here's what I will say. Of course, if Zach Evans goes around behind Tajay Spears, around behind A-Chain, and let's say Rashawn Johnson, I would be a fool to just stay true to him as RB5. So again, draft capital, landing spots will be very important. At the moment, my ceiling comps for him are Miles Sanders, Melvin Gordon type of player. My floor is Lawrence Maroney, Isaiah Pacheco. I think he's somewhere in between. I think that's what he'll be in the NFL, but time will tell. And also keep in mind that his athletic testing actually was pretty good. Go ahead and look at RAS's site. I'm pretty sure it was like an 8.73. And they have that number at him at 202 pounds. His agent said he was 208 pounds, kind of set the record straight for him. I think he had a pretty good testing. I think he put himself back on the map, but others disagree with me. Right now, my RB5. All right, at number 4, this was my sleeper of the year back in January, but I think at this point, everyone knows this kid. Israel Abanikanda. He finishes off this tier 3 for me. Keep in mind, from running back 4 to 12, it's interchangeable. The class really is that deep. But let's talk about Israel Abanikanda. Incredible testing numbers at his pro day at HIT. Check this out. A 4.38 40-yard dash, unofficial. Okay, I think it was a 4.45 officially. Really great splits from the 10-yard and the 20-yard split, which shows his burst. The best vertical in the class amongst running backs, the best broad in the class, comparable testing numbers to Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Stewart, and Breece Hall. Dude is a freak athlete. And not only that, he has the size. We're talking about a big body running back, 215 pounds, putting up these ridiculous type testing numbers. The game speed is there, as well as the testing speed. Great pass catcher. You saw that when Kenny Pickett was at Pitt, he was a much better pass catcher production-wise, and he's a super young player with not a lot of usage compared to these other rookies, right? If you look at career attempts, he has like 100 plus less attempts than some of these other guys like Bijan, Charbonnet, Bigsby, Tucker. He's a very young player with not a lot of miles on those legs. Now, there are some concerns. He doesn't have the best strength. Despite the size, he doesn't really play up to his strength. I mean, he has good contact balance, but he doesn't have good strength, like bulldog type strength. If you look at his yards after contact per attempt, he was 133rd out of 168 running backs who had a minimum of 100 rushing attempts. So on film, he does rely on that speed a little bit too much, but right now he's projected to go in the 4th round as the 8th running back off the board. I would be shocked if he's the 8th running back off the board after what he did with his testing. I think he's going to skyrocket up boards. Currently, my comps, which have been my comps throughout the entire process, ceiling, we're looking at a Raheem Mostert, Cam Akers type player, and the floor, we're looking at like a Tevin Coleman. But I do really, really like this player, and I think he could be a special player at the next level. Okay, so we have made it out of tier 3 finally, and we are into tier number 2. And let's start at number 3 with Zach Charbonnet. The good things about Zach Charbonnet, there's a lot of good things about this player. If I could sum it up, I would say the combination of size, strength, vision, contact balance, and this rare desire to just keep pushing for every single yard on every play is what makes him a special player. He's an angry runner, as we've talked about before. Yards after contact per attempt, he was 13th in the nation. Very impressive vision, consistent vision, improved as a pass catcher every year. In fact, in 2022, he had 37 receptions for 320 yards, doubling some of his previous categories. If he was in last year's class, he probably would have been my RB3. He's my RB3 in this class. It's another very, very good running back class. Tested pretty well. And if you look at RAS's comparable testing numbers, he compared really well to Rachaad White, oddly enough. I think he's a better prospect than Rachaad White, but as an athlete, he tested pretty similarly. Currently projected to go in the 2nd round as the 3rd running back off the board in the NFL draft. I would say that probably holds true. He's probably going after Jahmyr Gibbs, but before anyone else after Gibbs and Bijan, right? My pro comps for him, I think he's like a souped up James Conner, really, like a souped up James Conner, Deontay Foreman, like the best version of those players. The floor, I'm looking at like a Jamal Williams type player, but I really like Zach Charbonnet. Going to get a lot of work on the ground, can definitely be trusted in the air. So for fantasy purposes, the opportunities will absolutely be there, assuming he's a day 2 pick. And the only other player in this tier 2 for me at number 2 is Jahmyr Gibbs. We don't need to spend too much on these top guys, but overall, let's just talk about him as a running back. The burst and long run speed is some of the best in the class. If you look at his breakaway percentage, that is runs that were over 15 yards, 52.5% of the time. That's a ridiculous number, guys. 52.5% of the time, he had a rushing attempt go over 15 yards. Bonkers type of numbers. That was 8th best in the nation. Really good burst, gets to that top end speed that we saw at the combine very quickly. Versatile player. You can put him in the backfield, you can put him in the slot, you can put him out wide. He has the versatility to line up all over the field. He is an elite pass catching running back. We know that. We have seen that here out of Alabama. In fact, he led the Crimson Tide in receptions in 2022 with a, let's say, less than what they're used to wide receiver room there at Alabama. He actually had 26.4% of his snaps he lined up out wide as a receiver. And he compared, apparently, according to RAS's website, to Kenneth Walker. I don't see it, but the athletic testing apparently compared pretty well. The only concerns for him, again, is the strength and the size. But for me, he is one of those players who all the ways that you want your running back to win in fantasy, he wins. And he does it at an elite level. Currently projected to be the 2nd running back off the board in the early second round. I compare him a little bit to Aaron Jones and DeAndre Swift. My floor is like a Javid Best, but I think he's much better than that. And I have very to little concerns about him being a very good to elite fantasy option for PPR formats. And then at number 1 in tier 1, all by himself, Bijan Robinson. I figured we don't really need to go into depth too much about Bijan Robinson. He's going to go in the first round. We don't know exactly where. Maybe the Bears, maybe the Eagles, even though I know they don't draft running backs. Maybe it's the Patriots, maybe it's the Commanders. Maybe it's one of those back half teams like the Bengals or the Bills, who knows, but he'll be locked and loaded as a first round pick. I mean, compares really well to like Saquon. Let's say Saquon, David Montgomery, Marshawn Lynch, and Reggie Bush. If all those guys had a baby, it would be Bijan Robinson. Don't overthink it. He is elite. Not only is he incredible on the ground, but he's also a very good route runner out of the backfield. You're getting the full package with Bijan Robinson here. So that is my top 12 rookie running back rankings for the pre-NFL draft. These obviously will change after the NFL draft, but if you want to have updated rankings all throughout the draft, you guys know what to do. Go ahead and sign up to Flock Fantasy with our code LAND. Outside of that, do me a favor, drop a like to show some support, subscribe if you like Dynasty content, and I'll see you in the next video. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.